DreAllDay.com.
You're now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. What is that? That's the go-getter energy that moves all of us, including yourself, to go make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. Then we put all this together into one framework, actually several frameworks, several approaches, one unifying philosophy, several books, and a daily masterclass that you are listening to right now that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic, we are actually starting, I believe this is going to be a three-part series. Let me see, a three-part series that I have planned. The topic is how to gauge character. How can you become a better judge of character? This is a very, very, very important topic, and it surprised me that I had never actually done an episode on this in all these years we've been doing the Work on Your Game show. I've never actually taught people how they can get better at gauging character, even though I've mentioned it many times. Now, one of the reasons why this is an important point, and actually before I get to that, let me tell you something else important. I have a text message line where I send a daily motivation text every morning. If you want to receive that text, all you need to do is send me a text at 305-384-6894. Just say hello. You'll be confirmed. Once we confirm you, then you'll be in my text community. You'll get the daily motivation every morning. On top of that, that is my text number. So I actually go through there and I spend time every day replying to my text messages. So if you ever have a question, a challenge, or something that you want to share, get some advice or some help on. As a matter of fact, right now I have a basketball player who's asking me some questions about an overseas contract that he thinks he's in negotiations with, and he's not sure if he's being scammed out of his money or is a legit offer. I've been texting back and forth with him actually from yesterday and today. So any challenges like that or anything you just want to ask a question about or maybe just get some advice, you can send me a text also at that number. That is me replying to those texts. That is not a bot. That is not my assistant. That is me. So that number, again, 305-384-6894, and it is down below in the show description as well if you forgot it already. Now, this topic about how to gauge character. Now, one thing that I've told you many times is you can get more things done through other people than you can ever get done by yourself. And I want you to understand something about that saying, that I'm not just referring to the positive things that you want in life. I'm also referring to the things that you don't want. You will create success or failure faster through other people's energy and other people's efforts than you will on your own. You will fail through connecting with the wrong person faster than you will fail just doing everything by yourself. Even if you fail on your own, you'll fail faster if you get connected to the wrong individual. It'll speed up your demise. And if you're going to succeed, you will succeed faster if you get the right people around you than if you try to do all the success on your own and do all the hard work by yourself. Then you can succeed doing everything by yourself. It'll just take a lot longer than if you had the right people around you. And I've talked about this in many episodes here on the show. When we talk, first of all, let me give you some of those episodes, because I talked about in episode number 975, 76, and 77, we talked about the types of people you want to avoid and the types of people that you need to have around you so that you have an idea of what you're looking for out there in life, and also you can gauge yourself and judge for yourself. Do I fit the description of the type of people that I want to have around me? Because you can't attract what you are not yourself. And are you fitting the description of the type of person that may need to be avoided? Maybe that's why you're having trouble getting the right types of people around you. So we talked about those types of things many times here on the show. That was just one example. In episode 1880, I told you about the law of association, that you become the average of the people you spend the most time around. And I broke it down and explained why the law of association is the law of association, what exactly it means, and how exactly you need to be utilizing it in your life. Now, this topic here, when we're talking about gauging character, this is really a skill of discernment, which I talked about in episode 1431. Discernment is your skill of perception and judgment. That is your ability to look at a situation that is presenting itself as one way on the surface, and then having the skill to recognize what's really going on in the situation, which usually is not exactly as it has been presented on the surface. This is a skill. Now, this is something that you must learn, and usually you learn it by going through some situations where your discernment was off, but your discernment sharpens every time you mess up. So gauging character, you need to be very discerning of figuring out what another person's character is. I'm going to help you out with that here today. Now, understand, as I said, the right people are the key to your ongoing growth or the key to your soon downfall. You can do more with other people than you will do on your own. And this is a topic, as a matter of fact, since I'm talking about it right now, this is something I'm going to spend an entire day on. Day 1 and day 2. Actually, I'm going to spend 2 whole days talking about this when it comes to associations and the people around you at Work on Your Game Live, January 21st and 22nd, 2022, down here in Miami. That is a live in-person event. Now, day 1 is about leadership. Day 2 is about communication. Both of them, we're going to be talking about how you deal with other people. We're going to, of course, talk about how you deal with yourself, because we know here at Work on Your Game, we always bring the conversation back to number 1, which is you. But we also got to talk about how once you get you in order, now, how can you leverage what you know and who you are in order to get the right people around you? So again, at Work on Your Game Live, that link is down below in the show notes. Workonyourgame.live is the website. Even if you don't want to look in the show notes, workonyourgame.live is the link to the Work on Your Game Live event. You get all the details and tickets to the next event. One key to getting the right people around you in life is you being a very, very solid judge of character. So this is why you need to get really, really sharp at gauging who another person is, what this other person is about, or what are they actually bringing to the table. Like, is this a person who's going to help bring you up, or is this a person who's going to bring you down? Because remember that in life, there is no neutral. You are either getting better or you are getting worse at all times. So gauging character is going to be really important in your selection process, so you know who to stay away from and who you need to get around. So check yourself for everything I'm going to share with you here today, tomorrow, and the day after. There's going to be a 3-part series. And check the people who you have around you already, and check the people whom you will come across in your life moving forward. Point number 1. Topic, once again, is how to be a better judge, how to better judge people's character, or how to judge people's character. I'll decide on the title later. You'll know it by the time you listen to this. Point number 1. How does this person manage their emotions? Emotional control is an important aspect of a person's character. And a person cannot control their emotions, all right, they may be more of a headache than they will be a benefit to you. No matter what benefits they bring to the table, a person who can't control their emotions, I guarantee you they will bring you more headaches than they will bring you benefits. There may be some benefits, but you got to understand human beings are a package deal. All right, you got to take everything that comes with them, not just the parts that you want. Or maybe you might get lucky enough to pick out the parts you want and avoid the parts that you don't. Usually it doesn't happen that way. All right, eventually the other shoe drops, as we like to say. So in episode number 560, I told you that you're in the emotional management business. In episode 447, how to keep your emotions in check when the stakes are high. In episode 259, I told you that your personal power is when you align your emotion and your knowledge together. In episode number 1782, I told you that hurt feelings have now become a weapon in the emotion Olympics. And nowadays people are leveraging their emotion as a way to put fault on other people and then leveraging that to gain for themselves. It's a Machiavellian type of game, but it is happening. In episode 1781, I told you how to emotionally detach from something that you're doing and still produce results in that thing that you're doing. So make sure you check those episodes. And I also told you about the logical and emotional understanding of why to raise your prices in episode 1102. So this question of managing their emotions, let me tell you a quick story, because almost all of these points that I'm going to share here over today and the next 2 days, I have stories and things that I can think of, some of which I'll share, some of which I'm not at liberty to. But it reminds me of moments that really told me a lot about a person's character, and that either told me I need to spend more time around this person because they're the type of person I want in my circle, or it was a flashing red sign to say, get the hell away from this individual, whatever you need to do. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, just get the hell away from this individual right here. So let me tell you a story of a person who fit the latter category. There was a woman that I dated years ago, and very briefly, and I remember one day she had called me or texted me and she said, hey, I'm going to be at such and such place, wherever she was. I believe I was living in Miami Beach at the time, and she was going to be somewhere in Miami proper in the city, and she didn't have a vehicle. So she knew that I had a car. So she asked me, would I be able to pick her up at such and such time at such and such location? And I told her that yes, I would. But the time that she asked me, the thing that she was asking me to pick her up from was like a week away from when it was. And I said, yeah, I'll pick you up. And I didn't hear from her again for the whole week. And then that day came, and I remember that day. I specifically remember this day because it was like a weekday, like a Tuesday or Wednesday, something like that. And she had asked me to pick her up at maybe around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, at the time, the way that my schedule was, I would usually take a nap around that time. But I figured, since I told her I would pick her up, okay, I figured even when she initially asked me, okay, I just won't take a nap that day, or I'll take my nap later, or I'll take it earlier, whatever. But then that day comes around, I hadn't heard anything from her. She didn't even reach out to me to say, hey, I'm at this place, you're still gonna pick me up at 1 o'clock, right? She didn't confirm or anything like that. So I figured, well, maybe she was just talking shit and she really didn't want somebody to pick her up. Maybe she didn't care. I hadn't heard from her in a week. She didn't say anything, and I'm supposed to be her, her transportation back home. She didn't say anything, so I'm guessing maybe she forgot about it, or she doesn't need me as a ride anymore. So I just took a nap. I figured I figured that I wasn't gonna hear from her at all. Anyway, I'm in the middle of my nap and my phone rings. It's the girl. I picked up the phone, I'm like, hello, and she just basically starts screaming in my ear, like, hey, where are you at? Why haven't you picked me up? And she basically cussed me out for about 15 seconds. And 15 seconds is a long time to get cussed out for not coming and picking her up, because I guess she was expecting that I was still going to show up, even though I hadn't heard from her in over a week and she hadn't confirmed or anything like that. And again, this person is not like a lifelong friend of mine. This is just somebody that I knew, casually at that point. So she cussed me out and she just hung up the phone. She didn't even give me a chance to say anything back. She just cussed me out and hung up the phone. And what did I do at that moment? She cussed me out and hung up the phone. What would you do? I'll tell you what I did. It's not that dramatic. I went back to sleep. And I remember at that moment when she was cussing me out, I said, okay, this woman has not much control over her emotions. Now, I understand you could be kind of annoyed that somebody didn't pick you up when they told you that they would, because I did tell her that I would. But also, maybe she could understand, and who knows if she ever would, that since she didn't confirm, verify, reach out, I know if I'm going somewhere and I want someone to pick me up, I'm gonna stay in touch with that person. I'm gonna at least make sure I reach out to them the day before, like, hey, you still gonna be available to pick me up tomorrow at 1? I'm like, yeah, or whatever they say. And I'll say, look, I'm gonna text you tomorrow at like 12 and let you know like exactly where I'm gonna be at so you can meet me. Hey, I appreciate it. I'll pay for your gas, something. I'm gonna make sure I stay connected to that person so I can get picked up. That's just the logical way that I would think about it. But hey, not everybody thinks the same way. She's not wrong for not thinking that way. But I would have verified if a person that I don't know that well is the person I'm depending on to pick me up. I'm gonna make sure that this person really is actually gonna do it. And then when I picked up the phone and she just cussed me out like that, I said, okay, it's not that dramatic what happened. I mean, where she was at and where she needed to get back to, like her home was like 15 minutes apart. So it's not like she was stranded in the middle of a desert island or something like that. She could grab an Uber, she could take public transportation. I'm sure she knew other people with cars. I'm sure she had other options for what she could have done in a situation. And I'm gonna assume that this woman got home. I'm assuming she's not still stranded there 10 years later. But anyway, when she started cussing me out like that, I said, okay, this bitch does not have control of her emotions. I can't mess with her no more. So in the moment that she was cussing me out, I already knew I will never talk to this girl again. It's pretty much a wrap. So I'm telling you all that. We're still on point number 1 here. How does this person manage their emotions? One thing that I know for sure, and I know this to be very true, and any of you who has enough life experience, you know this as well, that when a person gets emotional, any type of emotion, I don't care if it's anger, like this girl cussing me out, annoyance, frustration, sadness, happiness, whatever. When a person gets emotional, you learn a whole lot about them in a very short period of time. And when someone gets emotional, especially a negative emotion like anger, let's just use something like anger. How quickly do they become angry? All right, what does it take to set a person off into anger? Because some people are very slow to anger and some people are very quick to it. Some people are very slow to start throwing blame around and assigning blame on other people and getting mad at people for minor things. And some people are very quick to doing that. And that tells you a lot about another person's character, how they deal with any type of annoying, challenging situation. This is one thing that you want to look for. Does this person react or does this person respond? And those are two different things. Do they react or do they respond? In episode 1537, I told you how to not react to online agitators, AKA trolls. If someone's trolling you, I told you how to deal with a troll. And it's not always try to win them over, and definitely is not go back and forth with them. In episode 902, I told you how to control your reaction impulse. If you have impulses to react to things, I told you how to get control over that. Again, that was 4 years ago, I was telling you about this. So again, I've been talking about things to help manage and shape your character. I talk about that actually every day on the show. before I actually had an episode talking specifically about character. You always want to check for, does a person react or respond? If you have a person around you who is a reactor, that means they do not put any thought in between the stimulus and the response. That's what it means to react. React means something happens, you immediately do something. You give some type of response, but you haven't thought about the response. That's a reaction. And a response is when something happens and then you put some thought before you send your response. So a reaction is a response too, but is a response without thought. There's no thought that goes in between the stimulus and the response. The challenge with being reactive, well, actually, there's some good things with being reactive. Any of you who's an athlete, when you're in the heat of the moment in a live game, you don't have time to think about what to do. So when you catch the ball on offense in a basketball game, you don't have time to think about what move should I do. You want to be more reactive. You want to be more instinctive, that you just do things instinctively because you practice so much you can do them without thinking about them. If you're responding, meaning you're trying to think about what to do, the game will move too fast for you to figure out what to do. By the time you figure out what to do, your opportunity is gone. So reacting works in certain aspects of life. When you're driving a car, you probably want to be able to react to things. If another car's veering off the road coming straight towards you, you probably want your reaction impulse in place in that moment so you can deal with it. If you're in combat sports and someone's throwing a punch at your face, you don't want to have to think about what to do. By the time you think about what happened, you already got punched in the news. So there are areas and aspects of life when it makes sense to be more reactive. In other areas, and I would think more often, you probably want to be someone who responds. And the response is where you control your emotions. Even if it's just a split second, that's when you take control over your emotions. And understand that every human being has situations where we will react and we have situations where we'll respond. And even when we do react, the question is, and when you're gauging another person's character, do they allow their emotions to get them out of control? Because all of us have emotions. Now, some of us are the types that wear our emotions on our sleeve and we just show it in everything that we do. And some people are more reserved. You have to kind of pull emotions out of them if you can even do it. The thing is, when any of us gets emotional, do you allow those emotions to get out of control to the point that you might feel embarrassed about what you did, the point that you might need to apologize for how you reacted in a certain situation? How often is that happening with the people that you're around? Again, we're talking about gauging character. Whenever you deal with someone who has this raging anger, another example, as a matter of fact, I don't know where everybody lives, but if you live in a city like I do, even a place like Miami, which is more relaxed than where I come from, Philadelphia, sometimes I see people in their cars. They are very reactive in driving. And often I honestly don't even drive that often. I can go a week or 2 or 3 without even getting in a car. But when I'm walking in Miami, it's not usually with me as the pedestrian and the driver, but I see drivers with other drivers because I am often in places that are near intersections with stop signs. So it's not usually at traffic lights. The traffic lights, we can all agree, are red light, you stop, green light, you go. But at stop signs or pedestrian crosswalks, it happens a lot of pedestrian crosswalks or the type of intersections where one way of traffic has a stop sign, but the other way does not. So you can only go when there's no traffic coming, no opposing traffic. And just the kind of aggression that you see from people and the aggressive beeping of the horns and people yelling at each other out the windows and drivers just ignoring that there are pedestrians trying to cross the street and just driving right across their walk path when you're supposed to be yielding for pedestrians. That kind of stuff, and then just the very aggressive driving that I think, first of all, I'm reading a book right now called Traffic, and it's all about how, not all about, but one of the aspects of driving that I've heard before, even before I read this book, is that when someone is in a vehicle, they feel like this is like the shell, it's like protective armor that you have around you to where you can do things that you probably wouldn't do if you were not in that car. Like you would say something to a fellow driver from inside of your car that you would not say if you were walking past that person. You would say something to a pedestrian out of your vehicle as you speed away that you wouldn't say if you were walking past that person. Because people just feel a different sense of security, I guess, when they're inside of their vehicles. But the point is, even with that, have you ever been in a car with someone who just had a little bit too much road rage that might have made you a little bit anxious to be in a car with them, maybe a little bit uncomfortable because they became so unhinged and unglued because somebody cut them off, or the light turned green and the car in front of them didn't start moving fast enough, so they're leaning on the horn and they're yelling at the person even though the person can't hear them and they're yelling from inside the car? Any of you ever been in a vehicle with somebody like that who had road rage? that tells you a little bit about that person's character. All right, if they can't control themselves in a low stress situation like driving, which should be a low stress situation, I would think. How do they control themselves in a high stress situation? All right, do you really want to be dealing with this person too often? This is a question for you to ask yourself. Raging anger is one. What about uncontrollable sadness? Type person that when they get sad about something, they just can't seem to pull themselves out of the doldrums. They just go into this deep funk and they just can't seem to turn it up. That may tell you something about that person's character. Like how often is this going to happen? And how long does it last? This is something that you should know. What about someone who has this bouncing off the walls, over the top happiness energy that maybe seems kind of fake? I've dealt with a lot of people like this. And being in the influencer world, being in the professional speaking world, and thought leadership world, these kind of worlds where you're doing this front-facing job and everybody's looking at you and you're trying to portray a certain image. And I've been around some people who really, really overdo it to the point that you can tell that it's fake, but they've been faking it so long that they don't even realize how fake they look, that they almost look like a caricature of themselves, but they either don't care or they don't notice. But I've been around people like that, and that tells me a little bit about their character. All right, this person has been faking it so long, they don't even remember that they're faking it. They have just become it. I get a mirror of motivation, like I tell you, who you're being, then what you do, then what you. They have become this fake version of themselves to the point that they don't even realize that is not even who they are anymore. So is this an everyday thing for these people? Is it something that happens a little bit too often for your comfort? These are all things you should keep in mind when you're gauging a person's character. So that's point number one. Let's move on to point number two. Today's topic, once again, is how to gauge a person's character. Number two, acts of kindness and rudeness. Now, I just talked about this a little bit when I talked about the road rage. How often do you see, if you're in a car with somebody or you see someone in a car and they just get a little bit too angry over something that they really shouldn't get too angry about? That is an act of, maybe they just get a little bit rude, more rude than they need to be given the situation, given the stimulus that caused them to respond. Now, I'm not saying that a person in the car may never have a reason to be mad at a pedestrian or a fellow driver. But again, how often are they doing it? How high do they go? All right, from 0 to 100 on the rage scale, how angry do they get because the car in front of them didn't start driving fast enough when the light turned green? How mad are they? How loud do they yell at a pedestrian who's crossing the street when they have a light? All right, how much out of control does this person get? And you also want to look for acts of kindness. How often is this person kind? And when I say kind here, what I'm meaning is they do something nice for another person that they didn't actually need to do. I remember, here's another story. I was with a woman at a restaurant, different woman, different restaurant, different time. And I remember the waiter came over to the table. And the waiter was just coming to introduce himself and take the drink order. And this woman who I was with, she talked very rudely to this waitstaff gentleman when he came to the table. She was talking to him like he was her servant. Now, he is the server serving us at the table, but she was talking to him like he was a servant, like a slave, the way she was talking to this guy. And when he walked away from the table, I asked her, why are you talking to him like that? Why did you say that? It wasn't even what she said, it was what she said, and it was how she said it. She just said it in this very disdainful type of way. It was the first time I had been dating this woman for enough time that I thought maybe I would have noticed something like this. But it was the first time, and we had been out to a restaurant before, but it was the first time I heard her talk to somebody like this, and the whole time that I had known her. And I noticed it immediately, so I immediately addressed it. I was like, why did you talk to him like that? And here's what she said. She said, you have to make sure you establish who's boss, or something like that. Or she said, you have to make sure they know who's the boss. And I said back to her, I said, wait a minute. And the way that she said it as if she was repeating a quote or a phrase. Like maybe she learned this in some book somewhere, or maybe somebody she knows did it to someone, so now she feels like she needs to do it. The way she said it was like she was quoting somebody. And that's what was her response to me. And I remember saying to her, well, what the fuck are you talking about? You have to establish who's boss. We're eating at the restaurant. We're patrons. We're controlling the check. We control the tip. I think he knows that we're the boss. I think he knows that he needs to give us good service so he can get a tip and put some more money in his pocket. I don't think you need to talk down on him for him to understand that. And she wasn't really trying to hear it. She kind of brushed off what I said, and we moved on and kept talking. But it always bothered me about this person. And as a matter of fact, whenever I envision this individual who I'm talking about right now, it's maybe 2 or 3 things that stick out about any time that I spent around her, and this is one of them. And it told me a lot about her character, and it told me that this person is probably not going to be, this may be a temporary thing, is fine, that this can't be a long-term thing, because I can't be too close to a person who would talk to somebody like that just because they feel like they need to establish who's the boss. It was just a standout act of rudeness. And it's not even, again, if it had been on TV or something, maybe some people would have noticed it. Maybe some people wouldn't even noticed it. But sometimes when you're around another person and they just do something or they say something that is, in the big picture, is kind of innocuous, but you just can't forget it. Those are things that tell you a lot about a person's character. And so it always bothered me when she did that. Another thing you can ask yourself about, again, you're looking at acts of kindness and rudeness. Type of person who holds the door open for another person. I mean a stranger, not for somebody that they know. Do they hold the door open for someone? Let's say you see someone coming into, actually here's another good example. Whenever I go to drop off packages, because any of these books that I tell you about, The Third Day, The Mirror of Motivation, Work on Your Game, all these books that I have, I've written 29 books. So when I'm shipping out books, sometimes, actually many times, when I'm taking books to the place to be shipped, whether it's the post office or UPS or something like that, I have two hands full of packages. Sometimes I just carry them straight as they are. Oftentimes I'll put them in some type of plastic bag or trash bag or container, because there's so many of them that I have to be able to transport them. And whenever I'm approaching the door of the place, and these places are very busy, there's people in and out all day. Like, you've been to a post office before, right? So when I'm approaching the door and someone sees me coming 15, 20 feet away with my arms full of those packages, do they hold the door open? Now, I'm not gauging specifically their character, because most of the time I don't even know who these people are. Never seen them before, will never see them again. But let's say you are with someone and they have an opportunity to hold the door open for somebody, in that case, somebody like me, do they do it or do they not? And if someone does hold the door open for you, and this one is a really big one for me, because this one happens more often. If someone holds the door open for that person that you're gauging their character, do they acknowledge that the door was held open for them? If someone holds the elevator for you, do you acknowledge it? Do you say thank you? Do you look that person in the face and thank them for holding the door open for you? This is a small thing. This is one of those little innocuous things, but I consider that to be, it's not even an act of kindness. It's an act of kindness to hold the door, but it's an act of manners to acknowledge that somebody held the door for you or held the elevator for you. And I've seen too many times, it didn't happen so much back in the day, but let's just say in the last 10 years, too many times I've held the door open for somebody and they didn't even acknowledge that I held the door for them. And now I'm a direct type of individual. I'm the type of person who will, it's not even that I'll say something, I'm not gonna make a big deal out of it, but I will look at that person, I will stare at that person until they acknowledge, like, yo, motherfucker, did you see me just hold that door open for you? And I've done that a few times, and the person will realize why I'm looking at them, and they'll say, thank you, like a delayed thank you. And again, these are little things, but when you're trying to gauge another person's character, often it's not the big things. It's not the big situation that causes you to really tune in on who they are. It's the little stuff, like how they talk to a waiter. Do they say please and please when they ask for something? Thank you when they actually receive something. Even if it's something that belongs to them, even if it's something that's owed to them, you can still thank a person. Those are just basic manners, and those are parts of my personal character. So I expect that from the people that I'm around. I'm not saying that this makes them morally wrong or anything like that. It's just the way that I'm looking at things. I'm just giving you these examples. So again, traffic. How does a person conduct themselves in traffic? It's a good way to gauge another person's character, simply because we all deal with it. That's the reason why I mention things like, how do you talk to a waiter, or you talk to some baseline level employee, like entry level employee, when you go into a business. You go into a post office and there's someone working a counter there and they get 50 people in line. How do you deal with that person? How do you deal with the hostess at a restaurant who told you that your table might be delayed a little bit or something like that? How do you deal with those type of situations when you clearly have the power in that micro situation? Do you have to talk down on that person to prove that you have the power, or do you treat them with respect just because you're a respectful individual? In traffic, again, how quick is someone to get angry and raging just because another driver did something that was clearly incorrect? Another thing is, and again, I'm trying to come up with situations that everyone has been through. An ex-associate. How do people talk about their ex-associates? For example, if you're dating someone, ask them about the last person that they dated and why they're not with that person anymore. How do they talk about them? Do they talk down on that person? Do they completely trash that person in such a way that you're like, damn, the person that they dated, who were you dating? Satan? who was the person that you were with? Do they trash them terribly? Do they talk positively about them? And whenever you go to a job interview, often, actually I would expect almost every time that your interviewer is going to ask you, okay, tell me about your last job and tell me about your last boss. Tell me what your last boss will say about you. Tell me about why you left that job. Tell me about something you didn't like about that job. And what are they doing? They're trying to gauge your character. They want to see, are you going to sit there and trash your previous boss? And just as a hint, you probably shouldn't do that, because if you'll trash them, then that means you're going to trash the job that you're at right now, if and when you ever leave it. So these are little things that you want to look for. How does somebody talk about an ex-friend? No, you're not cool with that person anymore. Why not? All right, what's the reason why you don't hang with that person anymore? Why did you move from that town to this town? Ask people about something that they used to do, or someone that they used to associate with that they no longer do and no longer associate with, and see how they talk about them. Because if they trash them and they're not around anymore, well, guess what? They're going to trash you. And it may also tell you a little bit about, is this person still holding on to some anger or some rage over that person or that past situation, which means maybe they're not fully living in the present moment right now, which might be a red flag of a headache on your hands if you keep taking it on. Let's move on to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is how to gauge a person's character, how to be a better judge of character. Number 3, self-accountability. You want to measure a person's level of self-accountability. How much self-efficacy does this person believe they have? How much oversight does an individual take over their own life situation? In other words, when a person is, whoever you're talking to, every person that you meet, I guess by the age of, let's just say by the age of 21, everyone has dealt with challenges in their lives. Everyone has dealt with setbacks. Everyone has dealt with failure, disappointment. Everyone's dealt with some type of unfairness. Everyone's dealt with some type of situation that just was very frustrating and really not working in their favor. Everyone has dealt with them. So if you talk to anyone for long enough in a conversation, one of those situations is going to come up. And what you want to listen for is, how did they deal with it? What's the most challenging thing you dealt with in your career or in your sport? You meet an athlete, what's the most challenging aspect of, or most challenging period in your career so far playing the sport? You meet a person who has a certain business. What's the most challenging thing that you've dealt with so far in your business? How did you deal with it? You want to find out about a challenging situation that person has dealt with, because everybody has them. And then you want to find out how they dealt with it. And specifically, not even what they did. What you really want to listen for is, what was their mentality when the challenging situation was occurring? And then when they finally responded to that challenging situation, if they responded to it, because some people, they face a challenging situation, they let it hold them back for 10 years. But assuming that they dealt with it, find out what their mentality was when that challenging situation happened. So giving you an example, using myself, I tell you about how I was trying out for the high school basketball team, getting cut. But I kept having this vision that I was going to be a basketball player, even though the reality said no. So I just went and tried again. And then I was able to make it. Then I made my high school team, sat the bench. Nobody thought I was going to go any further than that. But then I decided, hey, let me try walking on in college. I had nothing to lose, so I walked on, made the team then faced another setback in college. A new coach came in, clean house. I became a casualty of the new coaching program. But I said, you know what? Let me keep trying. Let me go see if I can make it pro. It took me a year out of basketball and out of college before I had saved up the money and got the opportunity to go to an exposure camp. Let me see what I can do there. Prove myself there. Started my career there. Then had more setbacks. Things weren't working even in pro basketball at some points. And I was able to get it going again, but at the same time, I said, well, what are my alternatives to business where I have some control? I became an entrepreneur, started selling products. So you can see over and over again, just in 60 seconds of me telling you just a quick snapshot, is things weren't working. I said, well, let me try this again. Let me do something different. Let me see what other way I can deal with this. Then usually you're hearing someone who has a certain level of perseverance, a certain level of persistence, a certain level of mental toughness. Now, not everybody's going to have a story like that. Some people are going to tell you some challenge that they had in life, and then you're going to ask them how they dealt with it, and they might just give you more story. Well, because people wouldn't help me out, because I didn't have the information, well, I kind of had to get away from that situation, or I stopped doing it. Some people are going to tell you, you're going to notice a pattern, rather, even when they're telling their own story, of somebody who likes to quit. Sometimes you're going to notice a pattern of a person who they will do their thing as long as things are working, but as soon as things stop working, they stop working. Sometimes you'll notice a pattern of a person who has things going well, but for whatever reason, their relationships keep going bad. Every situation in their life that was going good and then stopped going good is because of a relationship got ruined somehow, some way. You're going to notice these patterns in people if you just let people tell their stories. If you learn how to ask open-ended questions, get my book, 25 Conversation Starters, as part of the leadership bundle, which you can get at workonyourgame.com/books. And you just ask people open-ended questions about their own lives and just let them tell the stories of how things happen. Because first, let me give you a hint. Nobody gets annoyed when you ask them questions and let them tell stories of their own life. Everybody likes to talk about their own life if they know you're listening. You're going to notice patterns. You're going to notice habits, that they're doing the same things over and over and over again. I already told you many times on the show, people, for the most part, do not change. Who they are, their character is going to keep showing itself over and over and over again in their lives, no matter who comes around, you or anyone else. Their character will keep showing over and over and over again. So listen for the patterns of how they've dealt with things in their lives, how they dealt with challenges, how much accountability do they have to themselves. How often do you hear them say something like, you know what, I had to get better, I needed to improve, I messed that up, I made a mistake, I needed to own that, I needed to do something. Or how often do you hear them pointing to the externalities? Oh, this person did this, they weren't helping me out, this was unfair, that was working against me. Again, you will notice these patterns. If you start asking questions and really listening to people when they tell their stories, you will notice these patterns coming up over and over again. And it's funny, you would think, right, as you're listening to me right now, you would think that a person being aware of this will probably try to not tell stories that makes it look like that they're always pointing the finger at something or someone else, right? You would expect that. But the truth is, these people, the type of people who are of low self-accountability, type of people who don't take a lot of ownership for their own situations in life, you know what? They get so used to it and it's so baked into their character that they don't even notice that they're doing it. They don't even notice that they're exposing their lack of self-accountability and telling you these things because they've been saying it so often. They've been thinking it their entire lives. They can't change their stripes. All right, this is just who they are. So this is why asking these questions will tell you a lot, because people have no choice but to reveal who they actually are the more you allow them to talk. And again, if they think you're listening, they will talk all day. So figure out how much self-accountability this person has. This is especially important to notice for any person that you're going to deal with, knowing that long-term there will be challenges. There's no situation in life that doesn't come with a shit sandwich, like I told you in episode 1663. If you're looking for an athlete to play on your team as a coach or a teammate of yours, you want to find out how they dealt with the challenges on their last team. If you get into a relationship with someone, you want to find out how they deal with disappointment and sadness and a back and forth argument or a disagreement, because guaranteed you're going to have one. How are they going to deal with it? If you want somebody to come be your business partner, again, how do they deal with the fact that two people who are 50-50 partners are not seeing eye to eye? How do they deal with it? Do they shrink away from the situation and exit the conversation, or do they stay there and work on it until we can figure things out? Are they able to talk things through? Are they willing to be told no? How can they deal with someone rejecting them or not seeing things the way that they see them? How do they deal with that? You need to know these things before you get in too deep with another person. Do they own their situations? Do they own the mistakes that they made? Or do they blame, make excuses, or have elaborate stories that always end up absolving them of responsibility for their situation? Again, you would think people would be cognizant of this and try not to show this if they're the type of person who's always blaming and always pointing to externalities. But on the contrary, people get so used to telling these stories that they can't even stop themselves, and they will expose themselves if you just listen and ask the right questions. Moving on to point number 4. Today's topic, once again, is how to be a better judge of character. Ask yourself, is this individual always putting on a show? Does it seem like this person is always trying to put their representative out there and never show who they actually are as a person? Are they trying to present themselves as perfect all the time? How much does this person seem to care about and or notice how other people are observing them, how other people are assessing them, how other people are judging them? How much does this person seem to be doing everything that they're doing based on trying to control the perception of other people versus just being who they are, and however people perceive them, they just happen to perceive them? It's the type of person who's always angling for attention. They always seem to want to be in front of the cameras. They always want to be in a place where everybody can see them. Are they so out there about it that it just seems to be so much about just making them the center of attention versus just being who they are as a person? In my experience, people who are more surface than substance, they're easy to identify. The problem is that so many people out here, those of us who should be able to tell the difference, so many people are so blinded by what we see on the surface that we ignore the lack of depth that is under the hood, so to speak, of other people. If someone doesn't have much under the hood, understand that all that style that they have on the front, on the top, is not going to last too long. All right, it will eventually wear off. The effect will eventually wear off, or it won't work on you forever. This is just like, guys, I told you a few episodes ago, when you're dealing with the females out there, all right, some of them are temporary and some of them are long-term potential. Some of them are just temporary potential no matter what you see on the surface. They could look amazing on the surface, but if there's nothing there under the hood, let me tell you something. The amazingness of the surface presentation, eventually you get used to it. Right? The human body is an adaptation machine. We get used to any stimulus if we see it often enough. All right, understand what I'm saying here. In episode number 1286, I told you how to be a person of substance. If you haven't listened to that episode, make sure you check it. In episode number, let me tell you what episode that was where I was. That was episode number 1948. Females to buy versus females to rent. And you need to be very discerning in knowing which is which. And one way to discern who's for purchase and who's for rent is you want to look underneath the hood. All right. You see the surface presentation. Obviously, they want you to see the surface presentation, but is there anything underneath it? Because if there's nothing underneath it, then listen, I'm not telling you to not do what you got to do, but understand, don't make a long-term investment in a short-term product. All that said, let's recap today's class, which is how to gauge a person's character. This is part 1 of 3. And I've already given you the background on why gauging character is so important. The right people are key to your ongoing growth, or they will be the key of your downfall. You can do more through other people, succeed or fail, than you will by yourself, and you'll do it a lot faster. And again, at Work on Your Game Live in January, we'll be discussing this in detail. So let's get into our first 4 points. Number 1, how does this person manage their emotions? All right. How does this person deal with disappointment? How do they deal with frustration? Are they a reactor or are they a responder? This is a person who has raging anger, uncontrollable sadness, over-the-top happiness that appears to be fake. Is it every day? Is it happening a bit too often? Point number 2, look for acts of kindness and also acts of rudeness for that are unprompted and not necessary. Do they talk down on low-level employees? Do they seem to need to put other people down so that they can feel more up? How do they drive in traffic? How do they talk about an ex-mate or an ex-boss or an ex-business partner or an ex-job that they had? Do they talk terribly about people that used to be in their lives, or are they positive about them? It could tell you a lot. Number 3, self-accountability. How much oversight does this person take over their situation? How much ownership does this person take over their situation in their life? This is especially important for you because eventually, no matter who you deal with, no matter what you and that person are doing, there will be times when things don't go well, times when you and that person do not see eye to eye. Does this person own their situation, or do they blame, make excuses, or have some elaborate story that always perfectly absolves them of any responsibility for their station in life? This tells you a lot about a person's character. Point number 4, are they always putting on a show? Does it seem this person cares too much about how other people are perceiving them, and everything they're doing is just for the attention of other people or the cameras and most people that they don't even know? In my experience, people who are more surface than substance are actually very easy to identify. The challenge is for us in this day, in our Insta world, is that many of us are blinded by whatever we see on the surface, and we don't even bother to dig for substance. And that's when we make very, very poor long-term decisions based on short-term valuations. I talked about that again in episode number 1948. If you haven't listened to that, make sure you check it. Listen to it twice and take notes. All that said, anyone who's interested in being coached by me to where you can make sure your character, the best qualities of your character are being shown out there so you can attract the type of people that you want to deal with to build your business, build your team, build your relationships, and build your life, you may be a great candidate for my 3rd-day mastermind. Only way to get into it is hop on a Zoom call with me so I can talk to you about where you're at, where you're going, where you want to be, and how it can possibly be the bridge there. The link is down below. It's workonyourgameuniversity.com/call. And everyone who's listening, you want to get my daily motivation text, just hit me at 305-384-6894 right now, and you'll get the next daily motivation. Tomorrow we will go on to part 2 of 3, gauging character. Work on your game. Dre, all